Day, boys and girls. Today I'm going to give you some pre-reading notes on dramatic monologue, meter, and analyzing ideas in poetry. This is our last set of poetry for this unit. We're going to be reading The Seven Ages of Man by William Shakespeare and The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. The first skill that we're going to talk about here is dramatic monologue. A dramatic monologue is a poem in which there's only one speaker and he's talking to either an absent or a silent listener, as if engaged in a private conversation. But because the listener is either silent or absent, it often seems as if the speaker is talking to himself or herself. In these dramatic monologues, the speakers often reveal his or her own feelings, attitudes, motivation, character traits, and it's usually at a moment of really high intensity or deep emotion, which again kind of makes it feel like they're talking to themselves because it's like they just suddenly kind of go off and start talking about things. The first poem that we're going to read, The Seven Ages of Man, is a dramatic monologue. Our second skill for this unit is meter. We've talked back in elementary and middle school about breaking words and lines of poetry into syllables, right? So detention comes up with 3 syllables. We have D, ten, and shun. Now, what we look at with rhythm is that pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables. So if I look at detention, I put that stress on that middle syllable, that 10. It's detention. It's not detention or detention. It's detention. So you can think of a stressed syllable as like walking with a boot on one foot and a ballet slipper on the other. And every time the boot goes down, that's a stressed syllable. And then the ballet slipper whispers down, and then the boot whispers down. So we have detention. Okay, so then meter is just a rhythm that follows a regular pattern from line to line. And there's all kinds of different patterns that it can follow. We're not going to go into all of them, but anytime that each line is the same pattern, that's what we call meter. Poets use meter for many, many reasons. First and probably most likely is because it just sounds really nice. Human brain likes things that create patterns. We talked about it earlier when we talked about traditional poetry and free verse poetry. Traditional poetry follows meter usually, and just people tend to like it. It's easy to remember. Our brain likes predictability, and it allows for extra emphasis on certain words depending on where you put them in the line and whether they're going to get a stressed or unstressed syllable. In Shakespeare's poetry, he used a very even meter, something we call iambic pentameter, and he used it in every one of his plays and poems. I took a whole class on Shakespeare in college, and I can't think of a single poem or play that he did not use iambic pentameter in. Here's a couple lines of the poem that we're going to read. It says, "They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts." And I already broke it into syllables for you. So you see I have exits there with 2 syllables and entrances with 3. So his meter then looks like this. We have stressed syllables on have, x, and, n, and says. So it would, exaggerating it a little bit, it would sound like this. They have their exits and their entrances. And his lines all follow that. Here's the second line. And one man in his time plays many parts. Okay, and so it goes on and on and on like that, where you have that unstressed and then that stressed. And like I said, it's called iambic pentameter. Here's how we name it. An iamb is those 2 syllables, the unstressed and the stressed, together. And then pent is 5. So 5 iambs is iambic pentameter. And I don't know if he just didn't like any other meters or what, or if he just really, really loved this one, but this was his signature meter. Robert Frost, on the other hand, he used the same number of accents or stressed syllables in each line, but because the rhythm varies slightly, we can't say that he really used any set meter. Two lines from his poem here. It says, I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. And I broke it into syllables again for you. So his meter looks like this then. You can see here there are 1, 2, 3, 4 stresses in the first line, and 1, 2, 3, 4 stresses in the second line. But because there's 2 unstressed here and only 1 here, there's 2 unstressed here, it doesn't follow a regular pattern. So in exaggerating his rhythm, we can't call it meter, it reads, I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. And it's not as predictable as Shakespeare's was. Analyzing ideas in poetry is important, especially when you're looking at a more difficult poem like the Shakespeare or the Frost poems, these more kind of traditional ones. Looking for the main idea is going to help you to understand these poems better. And the first thing you do when you look for a main idea is to see if you can break up the poem into sections. The 7 ages of man can be divided into 7 sections. There's 1 for each age. And then Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken, is already actually divided into 4 stanzas for you. So we are going to treat each of those stanzas as a section. As you read each of these poems, I want you to look for the main idea of each age or stanza, and that will help you to understand what the whole message of the poem is really about. In the first poem, The 7 Ages of Man, we're going to have a chart kind of like this, and we'll probably do the same kind of thing with The Road Not Taken, where we list the 7 sections here or 4 sections in the Frost poem, and then try and come up with the main idea in each one. And I'll walk you through that on some of them, but then I'm going to have you go off and try it on your own too. So those are your pre-reading notes. These go on your note-taking page on the front side there. They are also in your book on pages 792 and 793, so you can go get those from the book as well. The poems are coming up next. Thanks.